Most people think a kingpin falls because of a massive war. They imagine a Hollywood shootout with thousands of soldiers and endless explosions. But that's not how it actually happened for Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes. The man they called El Mencho didn't fall because of a tactical error or a lack of firepower. He fell because of a $15 million itch that someone in his inner circle finally decided to scratch. It all happened on Sunday, February 22, 2026 in Tapalpa, Jalisco, which is a beautiful place full of pine trees and expensive cabins where the wealthy from Guadalajara go to disappear for a weekend. Mencho had been disappearing here for years. He felt safe in these mountains because he effectively owned them. He had the local police on payroll and halcones, or hawks, on every corner. In his mind, nobody moved in Tapalpa without his guys knowing. Or so he thought. What he didn't realize was that the leak had started months ago. This wasn't some high-tech digital intercept. Mencho was far too smart for that. He didn't use WhatsApp or satellite phones. He relied on handwritten notes and human couriers. To catch a man that paranoid, you have to find his Achilles heel. For Mencho, that was his health and his heart. We now know his kidney failure was reaching a terminal point. At 59, his body was performing like it was 80. He needed constant dialysis and specialized doctors, but more than that, he wanted company. Intelligence reports from SEDENA, the Mexican Defense Ministry, show they began tracking a specific logistics associate whose only job was moving a woman. She was Mencho's latest romantic partner, a woman the intelligence community is calling Guadalupe. She was the one link to the ghost. On February 20, the security detail moving her made a fatal mistake. They stayed at a specific cabin in Tapalpa for more than 6 hours. In the world of high-value targets, 6 hours is a lifetime. While the rest of the world was focused on the 2026 World Cup preparations, the U.S. Joint Interagency Task Force was watching a thermal signature on a screen. They saw a man walking with a distinct limp inside that cabin. They saw the monstruous, those armored cartel tanks hidden under camo netting in the driveway. They knew they had him. But why did the betrayal happen now, after 10 years on the run? Money is the easy answer. $15 million is enough to buy a new life anywhere. But there's a darker theory, the succession betrayal. The CJNG is a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and Mencho was becoming a liability. His son was in a U.S. prison, his daughter was sidelined, and the younger plaza bosses wanted the throne. They wanted him out of the way so they could negotiate with President Claudia Sheinbaum's new government. Someone close to him simply decided to hand him over on a silver platter to save their own skin.
On Saturday night, February 21, the town was quiet. But 50 miles away, stealth-modified Blackhawks were spinning up. The pilots were trained for a kinetic extraction, fancy military speak for a high-speed raid. Inside the cabin, Mencho was likely sleeping, guarded by 20 Grupo Elite soldiers. They had night vision and Barrett 50 cals, but they weren't expecting a betrayal from the inside. The informant hadn't just given the location, they gave the floor plan. They knew which room he slept in and which radio frequencies the guards were using. At 6:05 a.m., the breach happened. It wasn't a knock, it was a hellfire of lead. The military knew that if Mencho reached his escape tunnels, he'd be gone into the forest forever. The guards fought back in what can only be described as a massacre. 25 National Guard members would eventually lose their lives in the chaos of that morning. But the objective was secured. Mencho didn't go quietly. He reached for a submachine gun, but he was old, sick, and cornered. By the time the smoke cleared, the man who terrified Mexico for a decade was bleeding out on a rug. As he was airlifted away, the betrayal was already yielding its bitter fruit. The problem with being a legend is that you start to believe your own myth. Mencho thought territory equaled safety, but the more territory you control, the more people you have to trust. In the cartel world, trust is just a commodity with a fluctuating price. To understand the scale of what was lost, you have to understand that if Mencho was the fist of the CJNG, the Queen's clan was the brain. You can't build a global empire on violence alone. You need Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia, Mencho's wife and the daughter of a generational crime family. The Queen's operated like a venture capital firm, buying hotels and shopping malls across Europe and Asia. When Mencho married Rosalinda in 1996, it was a merger of brutal muscle and sophisticated money laundering. But by 2026, that machine was rusting. With the U.S. Treasury blacklisting their businesses and their children in prison, the dynasty was collapsing. The tracking of Guadalupe and Tapalpa was just the final thread in a web that had been unraveling for years. The death of El Mencho didn't bring peace, it brought a state of siege. By Sunday afternoon, Guadalajara was a war zone. The CJNG's rapid response cells set up over 250 blockades, burning buses and hijacking cargo trucks. In Puerto Vallarta, tourists watched smoke rise over luxury resorts as international flights were grounded. The most terrifying part? The 2026 World Cup. Guadalajara is a host city, and the cartel sent a clear message by forcing the cancellation of major soccer matches and erupting in gunfire near stadiums. They wanted to prove that even if the ghost was dead, his army still owned the streets. The king is dead, but the crown is lying in a pool of blood. Every young Sicario with a rifle is now looking at that throne.
Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes died in the air as the military helicopter banked toward Mexico City on the morning of February 22, 2026. The man who dodged death for a decade finally ran out of time. But in the world of the cartels, the death of a kingpin isn't the end of a story, it's the opening of a floodgate. Within minutes of his heart stopping, the ghost empire began to scream. The retaliation started in Guadalajara, but it didn't stay there. By noon, 250 blockades had paralyzed 20 different states. This wasn't just a spontaneous outburst of grief. It was Operation Black Sunday, a pre-planned, scorched earth protocol designed to hold the entire country hostage. They didn't just burn cars, they burned 20 banks and nearly 70 convenience stores. They targeted the economy itself. In Puerto Vallarta, the smoke from burning gas stations was so thick it could be seen from the cruise ships anchored in the bay. The human cost for the government was immediate and bloody. We now know that 25 National Guard members were killed in the first 24 hours. These weren't combat deaths from the raid, these were targeted assassinations. Men in tactical gear, carrying the CJNG insignia, ambushed checkpoints and police stations to send a message. You took our boss, so we take your peace. But as the fires burn, the real war is happening behind the scenes. The CJNG is not a brotherhood, it's a corporation. And with the CEO dead, the board of directors is picking up their rifles. This brings us to the most dangerous part of the story, the power vacuum. For years, El Mencho ruled with an iron fist, centralizing every decision. But with him gone, the cartel is splitting into two main factions. On one side, you have the old guard, led by the remnants of the Queenies clan and Mencho's wife, Rosalinda. They want to maintain the status quo and keep the money laundering machine running quietly. On the other side, you have the Menchitos, the younger, more violent plaza bosses who grew up in the fentanyl era. These guys don't want to hide in the mountains. They want total war. The succession betrayal we talked about in part 1 is already causing blood to flow in the streets of Zapopan. Factions are already hunting down anyone suspected of helping the associate who leaked the location. One CJNG member recently told reporters on the condition of anonymity, the attacks against the government were just the beginning. Now, the internal killings are coming. They're purging their own ranks, looking for the Judas who sold out the ghost for $15 million. This internal civil war couldn't happen at a worse time for Mexico. We're less than 120 days away from the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Guadalajara is a host city. The Estadio Akron is supposed to be a place of celebration, but right now, it's surrounded by military patrols and burning trucks. FIFA is reportedly holding emergency meetings. There are viral claims that the games might be moved to the U.S. or Canada, and while the government denies it, the reality on the ground tells a different story. The Mexican Soccer Federation has already been forced to postpone major matches. When gunfire erupted near Estadio Victoria during a match, the world saw the truth. Mexico's security is a glass house, and the CJNG just threw a brick. President Claudia Sheinbaum is in an impossible position. If she pulls back, the cartels win. If she pushes harder, the World Cup, the biggest PR event in Mexico's history, could become a massacre. And then there's the American factor. President Donald Trump has already issued a statement demanding Mexico step up or face the consequences. The U.S. provided the intelligence for the Tapalpa raid, but they didn't provide a plan for the aftermath. There is a growing fear in Mexico City that if the violence doesn't stop, the
the U.S. will use this chaos as a justification for direct military intervention on Mexican soil. So, who is the new Mencho? Some say it's El Tuli, the very man rumored to have orchestrated the leak. Others believe it will be La Jefa, Rosalinda, ruling from the shadows of her legal team. But the most terrifying possibility is that there is no new Mencho. Without a single leader to hold the factions together, the CJNG could fracture into 10 smaller, more violent cartels, each fighting for a piece of the fentanyl pie. El Mencho's death was supposed to be a victory for the rule of law. It was supposed to be the end of an era. But as the sun sets over the charred remains of Guadalajara, it feels more like a beginning. The ghost is buried, but his ghost still haunts every highway, every stadium, and every politician in Mexico. The $15 million betrayal ended a man, but it may have just unleashed a monster that nobody knows how to kill.